Thanks for coming. This forum is part of our ongoing efforts to give voters as much information as possible in order to make the most informed choices as possible. Welcome to the third, it says first on my sheet, it's actually the third, of 4 candidate forums presented by the Woodstock Democratic Committee. We've tried to make these forums as factual and unbiased as possible. Our moderator, we've already met, the first couple, is not from Woodstock and has no stake in our elections or in any of the issues we're discussing in these sessions. She's independent and will moderate the forums as she sees fit. The Woodstock Democratic Committee will have no input during the sessions. In order to know which issues and questions are most important to you, we've conducted an online survey of Woodstock voters and have factored your responses into the content and format of the forums. You'll have a chance to meet the candidates and ask questions of them personally at the WDC's meet and greet on June 22nd. We have not shared any of the questions we're asking the candidates or their campaigns. We have only told them about the format, rules, and 3 major issues that you told us you wanted addressed. Environment, including climate and water, that was last session. This session is development, including housing and zoning. The next session will be accountability and management, and then the last will be including personnel and police department. We are recording these forums so that many more people, other than all of you here today, can watch them at their convenience. Please remain quiet so that each candidate's statements will be clearly heard on the videos. Again, thank you for coming and taking time out of your lives to learn about our candidates. You are why we do this. You are why democracy still works. So I'd like to introduce Christine Dinsmore again, who will review the ground rules and start the forum.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I got up this morning. Hello. Good morning, everyone. You hear that? I'm so concerned about the buzz here. I got up this morning and it was cold and raining, and I thought, oh, this must be the Woodstock Forum today. So, welcome, and here we are. It's almost June, and I had a winter coat on this morning when I took my dog out. Okay, here we go. I just want to remind everyone that this is the third of 4 forums, and then you will have a meet and greet. A little recap. The first forum, the candidates got an opportunity to introduce themselves and speak in general terms about their vision. The second forum focused on the environment, specifically water and the climate, as in climate change. And today's forum will focus on development, zoning, and housing. Candidates will have an opportunity to demonstrate their overall knowledge on the issues and how they would address specific concerns. I remind everyone that this is not a debate nor a platform to discredit or disparage their opponents, but to focus on their knowledge and problem-solving capabilities as they pertain to development in Woodstock. The format. The questions have been selected from submitted questions from the public who responded to the Woodstock Democratic Committee's outreach to registered Democrats. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer specific questions. I may ask a follow-up question after an answer if I believe further details or clarifications are needed, and that response will be up to 30 seconds. We ask that the audience refrain from applauding until the end of the program. You know, I'm going to specifically say here that the last time I saw people were like, not sure should they applaud when they were introduced. You can applaud after they're introduced. I'm not that crazy, okay? So, you know. Okay, also a reminder, there's no electioneering in the building, including posters or flyers, and not that this needs to be said, but any interruption of a candidate from the audience or other candidate will result in that candidate having more time added to their response. In keeping with my role to provide an environment where each candidate can put their best foot forward, I want to remind everyone that while specific issues can be charged and even controversial, your enthusiasm or passion about a subject or a candidate does not preclude that we ask that you refrain from cheering or jeering. Finally, the forum is being recorded and will be posted to the Woodstock Democratic Committee website and Facebook page within the next couple of days. Let me introduce our timekeeper, Susan Bissonette. Okay. You can clap for Susan. That's not an easy job, because if people want to keep talking and you have to kind of keep nudging them to stop. Okay, I'd like to introduce the candidates. First, the town supervisor candidates, Anula Cortes, Erin Moran, David Wallace, and the town board candidates, Lily Korlikoff, Marcel Nagel, and Lori Osborne. So candidates, you ready for the questions? Okay, we're going to again begin with the town supervisors, moving from left to right. So that means we're beginning with you, Ms. Cortes. First question, what is your position on balancing development with conservation and preserving the town's character?
I'm for it. I think that these are really complicated topics. So the idea of zoning alone is very controversial. The idea of housing and building is very controversial. Sustainability is part of the core of Woodstock. It's part of who we are. It's part of who we've always been. And so whoever the next supervisor is going to have to be able to balance these items together and move them forward in a way that is very transparent, in a way where we take these overly complicated concepts and put it into plain English that we can all discuss and debate, agree or disagree regardless, and come up with something that we agree on that improves where we are today. If we look at our current zoning, it does not in fact support the environment. But we need to sit down and in an easy to understand manner, listen to people, clarify things, put it in a way that we understand, protect our most sensitive regions. And so this is the fabric of who we are. And again, I'll end with, I'm all for it.
Thank you. Ms. Murray?
Thank you. I think it's really important to balance the growth that is coming and long overdue with keeping the character of our town. I think that we should allow for flexibility and more smaller scale housing. I think that we need to address the modern needs of our zoning and the modern world that we live in. Things are changing. Things like mother-daughter houses, ADUs, accessory dwelling units, these are important. I think that we should incorporate stricter environmental guidelines. There are some environmental guidelines that are in the zoning, but we could make them stricter, and we should. Why do we need to do this? We need to protect our Woodstock, which is so special and precious. We need to support the climate smart community goals that we've already been a part of. These are things like adding solar and promoting energy efficiency. As we grow and have more housing and infrastructure and whatnot, we need to be aware of things like climate change, and we need to be aware of being efficient, energy efficient, and working with possible options that are out there on the county level as well as the state. I think this can be done. I think that we need to be aware of the planning board and the zoning laws. The planning board, we need to trust them to make the right decisions when plans are in front of them, to make sure that they incorporate things that protect our environment and the character of the town.
Thank you. Mr. Wallace?
Thank you. Well, I'll tell you what I think we don't need. Complexes for millionaires with helipads and massive golf courses. I don't think we need any of that. So I'd like to focus on affordable housing. And I think that's what is crying out, not only affordable, but workforce housing, senior housing, housing for artists. I just focus on that growth. And a recent housing committee meeting noted that the gap between what we have and what we we really need was 139 rental units and 118 for sale units. And that was, I think, in 2009, so all that's probably gone up. So it's a huge number and of the gap, and I think that it will take a variety of initiatives to combat that. And that gap should be our sole focus, really, in terms of growth. So the first thing to do is do no harm, which means keeping people who are struggling in their homes. And so to do that, one of the things we could do is increase the property tax exemption for seniors and disabled folks from $50,000 to $58,399, which is what the state allows us. And that could be done right away. We don't have to wait till the next election. That would make a difference in people's lives right away. And also, inflation's on the rise. Federal anti-poverty programs are being gutted, so Woodstock should not raise your taxes like the current administration did last year when it racks up a more than $3 million surplus. We shouldn't raise taxes at that point. I would have kept taxes flat, the property taxes flat.
Thank you. Ms. Kolikoff.
I think it's the utmost importance because our character is really our brand. People don't come here looking for something that feels like the Hamptons or feels overdeveloped. And the key, I think, to keeping and conserving the character of the town is really giving the tools to the planning board and updating the zoning in a way that does make it really clear what is and is not permissible. And I think it's also, thinking about multi-dwelling units differently. I mean, currently, we do have a lot of development going on. We do have the threat of development, but we don't really have the conservation guidelines in place to prevent people from overdeveloping. So I think in looking at the zoning propositions, they do actually give the planning board better guidelines in terms of what can be conserved. It puts a conservation requirement in. If you're developing a lot of land, 50% of it now is going to have to be permanently conserved forever. And then that goes into also talking about what the usable land is. So there's not like a whole lot in the zoning. There's not a lot of lots within the R5 and R3 and R1 zoning areas that do permit massive developments. But in terms of the conservation overlay and the scenic overlay, there's no multi-unit developments that are able to go in there, right? So when we think about what our neighborhood looks like, I think it's more about duplicating what our neighborhoods currently look like. We have the Bearsville Flats, we have neighborhoods within the Woodstock borders that are lovely, and I think we could actually just kind of, keep going with that, not in a massive scale, because again, the new zoning proposal doesn't allow it on the scale that people think it does, but basically copying past practice in ways that actually protect the environment and give opportunities to seniors and artists and workers in the town.
Thank you. Mr. Nagel.
So I've been around a little for quite a while, and actually I'm a big believer of the current zoning law that was enacted in 1989. I think when you really adhere to the existing zoning law and then you implement all the abilities of the planning board, the zoning board of appeals, and then the work that the environmental commission has done, I think Woodstock actually is very well protected. We need to follow all of those guidelines, and that's going to really protect us. There's always going to be development, always has been, definitely needs to be controlled. I think we do have to work towards some affordable housing. I think it's a responsibility for our town to provide affordable housing. But I don't believe that we want to have widespread development. There are areas and parcels of land that can currently be developed within the existing zoning law, and they're not, they're vacant parcels. So I'm a little leery about opening our town up to further development when we haven't reached a build out. However, if we can achieve some affordable housing, that is definitely something that we want to look at. But again, the Environmental Commission, they are built into the process to protect the environment with their critical environmental areas. The Zoning Board of Appeals is what really governs when somebody wants something that's above and beyond the zoning law. They have the ability to say yes or no, and the planning board comes into play on a lot of this stuff. So real competent people on all of them boards combined with our zoning law is really what's going to protect us from overdevelopment.
Ms. Osborne?
Thanks. Yeah, so definitely there should be balance. I mean, balance is the key thing here, because we need to balance the fact that we live in the forever wild Catskills. We live in a very rural environment that's renowned for its nature and its beauty, and that's one of the reasons that we're here, and that's also one of the reasons why people want to either stay here or come here. This is a very loaded subject, because housing is about survival. You know, it's about having a roof over your head, and I know that there are a lot of people who are having trouble finding that right now. So I think that there does need to be a balance between conservation and also creation of housing that will help the creation of affordable housing, but in ways that suits the character of our town, not in apartment buildings, but looking towards maybe even a few small co-housing models. Like there's a place in Saugerties near the marina where it's a cluster of small single-family homes all in a community space. It's I forget the name of it. I thought it was called Cantine's Landing. But anyway, it's a small little cluster of homes with a shared green space, very low impact, single driveway in. These are the sorts of things we could be talking about. I do think that there are some really valuable things in the proposed zoning changes, including the conservation of 50% of usable space into green space. I also think that there should be a little bit more town board oversight included too, as the individual projects may or may not come up, and the town needs to also work with nonprofits to do one or two developments on the town-owned land that we have, all within moderation, all within keeping the character of the town, but trying to find a compromise. Thank you.
Thank you. The second question, some of you have actually already addressed it in a general way, and I'm going to ask you to address it as specifically as possible. Towns in Ulster County, or actually the country, including Woodstock, are facing a housing affordability crisis. How would you address housing affordability? Now, I know some of you touched on that, but I'm really giving you an opportunity if, in fact, you have specific thoughts about addressing it. And we'll begin with Ms. Moran.
Thank you. It's hard because these three topics really do intertwine with each other, so I think we're going to have a lot of that today. One way that we can bring affordable housing to Woodstock is I've been looking at some of the opportunities that are out there with the county as well as the state. There are a lot of programs that we're not taking advantage of, and I think we need to do that. So we need to work with developers. We're not going to be building these houses ourselves. We need to encourage developers who are going to be green, who are going to respect the character of our town, who are going to respect our new zoning that respects critical environmental areas. There are tax incentives that we can give to the developers if we ask them to section out a part of the development for affordable housing. They get a benefit, tax incentive. But along with that, there are things that are collaborative, other programs that we can use with that program. So some of those things, there's a home, it's called HOME, it's an acronym, and as well as SHOP. These are actually programs that help vulnerable populations get into homes. So it's not just about low income or affordable housing, but it's also about helping disabled people, veterans, victims of domestic violence, helping those people get into homes who may not qualify for other assistance. Housing trust fund, setting up a mansion tax. I think these are all ways to help everyone financially as well as collaboratively make green development possible while keeping the character of our town possible. Hopefully that answers it.
Mr. Wallace.
So, the average rent in the 12498 zip code is $3,100 a month, according to Zillow. The median home price, according to Realtor.com, $595,000. So the lack of affordable housing has real dire consequences for our community. Pattern for Progress, a think tank, studied why people leave our area, and the number one reason was housing. And this exodus prompts public schools to close, fire departments like the one I belong to struggle to retain and recruit volunteers, and hurts local employers that face staffing shortages. So one of the things we could do right away is the state allows us, the town, to establish a property tax exemption for newly constructed homes that are purchased by first-time home buyers, and we could do that yesterday. We can, as I said, raise the property tax exemption for seniors and disabled folks, and one of the interesting things that we could do is the Community Preservation Act, which has been discussed by Bill McKenna. He raised the idea in May 2022. I know we have our differences, but I'm giving him a shout out. And he said that the Community Preservation Act would permit the town to have a tax on the sale of properties that are over the median price of the county. And so we could then charge buyers of homes up to 2% on amounts over the median price. And that revenue could be earmarked for affordable housing initiatives. I think it's a great idea, and it requires a referendum. It requires the state to approve it, apparently, but I'm all for doing that. And then I'm sure we'll get a chance to discuss this in greater detail, but I think we need to go a little higher, meaning that we should have buildings, occasional buildings that are a touch higher than 2.5 stories.
Thank you. Ms. Gordis.
This is a perfect storm: housing affordability and environmental vulnerability. So some of the things that we can do is immediately work towards smart clustered developments. That does not mean very large buildings that are multi-story buildings. What that means, or could mean, is 2-story small homes in a beautiful area clustered together to share the use of septic, wells, etc., so that we don't have what we currently have, which are single home developments. Those are highly profitable to developers, by the way, and that's something that I think we want to move away from. Environmentally conscious ADUs. So one example of what this means, an ADU is an accessory dwelling unit. I have a home, I want to build an area that in my home that I can rent to somebody. There are certain requirements that I won't go into for that. But we can empower the planning board to enforce that the septic must be shared. We're not going to put another septic in. We're not going to dig and expand and do things in a very big way. We're going to do things in a very smart, environmentally conscious manner. There are regional housing partnership opportunities where we can work with workforce housing beyond our borders. So we can look at things where we can work with state and county to develop transportation, to put together a shuttle service so that we accommodate our workers. And time is running out here. I'm not going to touch on the financing right now, that's a big topic, but I want to come back to strengthen the environmental standards. We don't have environmental protections. We need to put things in place so that any development cordons off half of it and leaves it open space. Can we agree on that?
Thank you. Now to the town board candidates, beginning with Mr. Nabel.
So the affordability is a big question, and the first thing we have to understand is who we're trying to make it affordable for. It seems to me that houses that come for sale on the market currently, it's taking a little longer for them to sell, but they sell. And they're not affordable for the majority of the workforce that we have. And you know, specifically when we talk about the affordability aspect with building, housing, similar to what Rubco built there. That's the way we need to go to serve the disadvantaged people or the struggling people. Again, I said it last time, or in a meeting, I see the solution for the town of creating, they're not gonna be able to get the density of the units we need to fulfill the problem on the town parcels that we own, but we might be able to provide some units on each of those parcels. When you get down to the construction costs of new construction to meet an affordability aspect, it's really difficult. The current cost of construction, my understanding, is $400 per square foot. I think it's a big mistake to assume that private enterprise or private people individually are going to create vast numbers of affordable housing under the guise of these ADUs. People generally want a return on their investment. If they're gonna build it and lay out the money, they want that return on investment. Occasionally, we'll find somebody in town that's gonna build something that's gonna really hold the rent down. Hooray for them, but the majority of the developers and investors in real estate are not looking to get a lower return on their investment to build affordable housing.
Thank you. Ms. Osmond?
So housing affordability is driven by a lot of things. There's a shortage of rentals, there's a shortage of homes to buy, and there's also a lot of people here who don't make a living wage. And this is not just a Woodstock problem, this is a national problem. And we're living in a society currently where corporate profits are valued more than quality of life. And I don't know that Woodstock can change that, but I think we need to acknowledge that. There are several things I think that we could do to address housing affordability. And I agree, this won't be done by private homeowners. There may be a unicorn out there who is willing to do that, but that's not the way it's necessarily going to happen. I do believe that partnerships with nonprofits are a good way to go. The other thing that hasn't been mentioned is I think we need to tighten our short-term rental regulations. There are a lot of homes out there that are occupied just a few days a week. And I think that we need to be really looking at that, particularly with non-resident owners, because one of the reasons that rents are so high is because there are so few long-term rentals. And then supply drives demand drives supply drives demand, prices go up. And is that me? Oh, okay. So I think that really needs to be a part of the conversation, because we are really maxed out as far as STRs go. And I also want to acknowledge that a lot of full-time residents do rely on their short-term rentals in order to help pay their bills. So this is a very complex conversation, but I think that needs to be part of it. Thank you. Also, I think we need to be talking about sustainability as we build, because part of affordability is energy efficiency. I think we need to be looking at tax incentives. We also need to be looking at additional taxes for certain types of things. I think the idea of perhaps a millionaire surcharge is a good idea, and there are other ideas, and I'm out of time. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Holocaust?
I think short-term rental reform is probably the biggest and easiest way that we can actually get more units on the market right now. When you look at the fact in February 2023, we had 197 illegal STRs in the community. That's about, if you're looking at a 2 to 8 bedroom house, it's about 2,000 beds that aren't being filled by residents. And one of the ways that we can do that, we already have the first module of the Granicus software in place. But if we went further and purchased the second module, that's the module that actually helps you with enforcement. So the first module is basically an AI crawler that scours the internet for illegal rentals that are coming up on various sites. I think there's like 72 different sites that you can rent an Airbnb-like situation from. So that's impossible for our building department to manage on its own. The enforcement module would give the ability for the building department not to have a logbook and manually take in phone calls from police or realtors or neighbors about, complaining about short-term rentals that maybe not, or that are illegal, that basically are in the system. That's the only way that we're monitoring currently. So that would be my first thing. And then I think also going into kind of the community land trust idea. So the community land trust idea would manage land and buildings. It would also lower tax rates for those buildings and structures within the Community Land Trust, and it promotes not-for-profit building because it gives them tax-free supplies for buildings. So if you wanted to lower that cost per square footage of building new buildings, that's what you would do. And then we also go into, sorry, I'm going to find my note on it because it was really important. Sorry, oh, and home share. Home share is a really great program that I kind of have a little bit of experience with. But there is no tax incentive on the home share program right now. And that basically allows seniors to have somebody come into their home. You can kind of subdivide your space so that you can have 2 separate living quarters and have seniors have like the help and backbone that they need to do their everyday chores, to take care of their property. So I think those would be my top 3.
Thank you. Okay, the next question, again, as we're seeing that housing does overlap with lots of issues here, so at least one of you touched on this, but I'm going to throw it out to all of you, and the person who did touch on it could speak a little further. What role can the town play in creating more housing versus what the county, state, and third parties can do? And how would you collaborate with them? And we'll begin with Mr. Wallace.
Well, one of the things that I think that the town could do, and I touched on this a little bit, is we could finally admit that we may need to have, at least with affordable housing, a different height requirement. Instead of 2.5 stories, maybe we need, I'm not talking about urbanizing Woodstock, I'm not talking about creating skyscrapers or anything like that, but maybe a little higher we could go. And there's a problem with that, which is that the fire department, which I'm a member of, doesn't have the trucks to handle more than 2.5 stories. So on the first day that if I were to be elected, I would meet with the fire department and also RUPCO, and which I think is the organization that we really need to woo back. They created Woodstock Commons, and I met with RUPCO. I got the sense that they might come back, but they didn't love the experience of creating Woodstock Commons, and we need to woo them back in any way possible that we can. And so I would also hold a design competition, like get the best and the brightest minds to create a competition that would both promote Woodstock and create, I think, incredible ideas for affordable housing. And it would, I think, bring a tremendous amount of energy. Maybe we have a little prize for it, and I know that the minds that are in Woodstock are the architects who are around here would also have a lot to say.
Thank you. Ms. Cordes?
The question relates to what Woodstock can do with housing and how versus, or at least this is my interpretation, versus county, state, feds. It's a collaborative effort, but it's locally driven. So we rely on state and county regulations for technical and financial support. But we maintain control over what we build here in Woodstock through our zoning code, which doesn't invite developers, it simply tells them what and how they can build. And we maintain control through our environmental review process, which we can strengthen. So what we could and should do is to update zoning to reduce what can be built on properties. We want to preserve half of all of our open land. What is smart growth? What does that look like? How do we concentrate density? What partnerships do we have to help with workforce housing? But I'd also want to introduce a new concept that I'd like to see Woodstock put together, which is a Woodstock Affordable Housing Task Force. So we talk about housing and we need housing, but I have yet to meet a single individual who knows how much we need. So who currently works in town? Who currently works for the town? Where are they coming from? Are they here full-time? What is their commute like? So what I would like to do the first month in office is put this task force together. And yes, there will be local people on it. So we understand who's already here, where they live, where they're coming from, what they can afford, and then let's use that as the basis to guide what we build so that we can keep Woodstock local.
Thank you. Do you want me to repeat the question? Yes?
Yes, please.
The specific question is, what role can the town play in creating more housing versus what the county, state, and third parties can do, and how would you collaborate with them?
Okay, thank you. So as I mentioned earlier, I think the collaboration comes in taking advantage of the programs that are out there, giving tax incentives to the developer so that they can actually get a better ROI, as well as getting people into homes that fall into the lower income bracket, our workforce. You know, these are the people that we deal with every day. These are the nurses, the teachers, the person who's waiting on you when you go out to a restaurant. They want to live here, but they have to travel from other towns to get here. I think that one thing the town could do in addition to that is take a look again at our zoning. So the zoning that's been sitting before the board, it's been sitting there for, I believe, over a year. We had over 30 public meetings and discussions about that. It's been out there, and for some reason it's stalled, and we can't get it moving forward. There's a lot of conversation about some additional input that we would like to see in there. I've heard some things about environmental. There are some promising environmental requests in it. I would like to see slightly stricter regulations because that's the forefront of Woodstock. I think we need to really collaboratively come together and push this zoning through. If we're not happy with it, we need to yet again sit down and say, what is it missing, and we need to get it done. I'd like to do that when I'm elected, but gosh, that's not until next year. And I don't know that we can wait that long. There's a lot of missed opportunities. I think one thing we could do to incorporate into the zoning is, as you've heard, the mansion tax. Just 1 to 1.5% on a house under $2 million would generate $300,000 in revenue a year based on 20 homes sold. That's a nice start.
Thank you. So we're going to begin with Ms. Osmond.
So I do think that the town can play a good role. I don't think we're going to solve the whole problem, but we can certainly go a long way towards working with that. I do not believe we should be looking at 3 or more stories. I just really, while I recognize there's the need for units, I just think that's not going to suit the rural character of our town at all. I think that that's much more of a suburban kind of idea, and I don't think that's the way to go. I do think that working with something like a RUPCO or a Habitat for Humanity is a good way to do something without the town having to become a landlord. Like, for example, I know there's just a handful of what they call zombie houses, which are houses that are vacant and disrepair and just sitting there, but perhaps there could be a conversation with a Habitat for Humanity to possibly, even through something like eminent domain, rebuild those houses and then have them under control for Habitat or even for sale through Habitat in an affordable way. It's a small idea, but I think that's something that could be looked at. I do think we also need to expand the home share if people are willing to do that, and I think some tax incentives would also encourage that. I think that would help with senior housing, with affordability, and also just housing density. I also think that the idea of, again, with our zoning, again, this has to be really carefully managed, and the conversation should continue before the new board comes in January. The zoning does need to be tightened so we have better environmental restrictions, but I do think we should be looking at creating the opportunity for more co-housing, for more of our small developments, but in a very limited, very measured, very considered way, because broadly allowing that would, again, change the character of our town. There's a lot of balance that has to be achieved here, and I think there are a lot of conversations to be had, but I think that we should be having them as soon as possible.
Thank you. Ms. Golikov.
Yeah, so I think passing the zoning updates is primary in this because, so with the new zoning updates, it requires affordable housing when you're building new, other than when you're building like a single family or a duplex. It also requires that affordable housing exists in every subdivision. So if you're subdividing a property currently, you don't have any affordability or affordable housing requirements there. In the new zoning, you do. And also in the new zoning, there's no short-term rentals permitted in any multifamily structure, whereas currently you could have a short-term rental in a multifamily structure. So I think those kind of small things are really important to take in consideration when you look at the zoning, but also in terms of like changing the conversation. I tend to agree that we shouldn't be building higher than 2.5 stories. I think when we're talking about the character of the town, that's a very, very big issue. But when we think about multifamily dwelling units, we tend to think of like project buildings or big ugly buildings, and that's not really what the modern like urban initiatives are pushing. They're pushing more of like a single family looking house, but that is well designed enough that you can have 3 or 4 separate units in it. But I mean, we just really have to change the conversation and not stigmatize the idea of affordable housing. We know who's not here. We know that we don't have families. We know that we have an elderly population that needs, smaller spaces, sometimes need to downsize or need to have their families up here. So, I mean that would be my recommendation.
Thank you. Mr. Nagel.
In a lot of ways, I believe the affordable housing problem is the most difficult issue for the town of Woodstock to solve. I believe we have to team up with RUPCO or some other housing authority like that. Habitat for Humanity, they seem to acquire zombie houses and then renovate them and make them available for people that need affordable housing. The zoning law as proposed, I think we're in a lot of trouble with what's been proposed. If there's not adequate protections to assure that these units that may be built are really protected for people that need affordable housing, we're setting ourselves up for failure. So it's a really complicated issue. For instance, the Salina Hotel property at 6.48 acres was a hotel. It's lost its grandfathered use. A developer within the last year purchased 6.48 acres for $3 million. So if you open the zoning law up too much, you're going to get those developers that are looking for the return on investment. This zoning revision is so complicated, we have to be so careful with that. And I think there's a lot more work that has to be done. There was a lawyer that spoke at a recent town board meeting. He kind of seemed to lay out some problems with the process that has been undertaken so far for the revisions. I have documentation if anybody wants that. I'll provide it in the interest of transparency. It's a very complicated issue. There is no easy answer, and it's going to be a multi-pronged approach involving housing authorities and agencies and the state and the county. It's not unique to Woodstock. We need to involve other agencies to solve the problem.
Thank you. So the next question again is in terms of it's somewhat repetitive, but I'm going to give you an opportunity for those of you who spoke about it already to expand and others who didn't. But there's 2 parts to this question. Regarding your plans for housing and development, what specific changes to the zoning laws would be required to enact them? And there's a part 2 to this. What is your position on the recommendation proposed by the Housing Oversight Task Force? Okay, do we have those? It's kind of a double question there. Sure. The first part of it is regarding your plans for housing and development. What specific changes to the zoning laws would be required to enact them? And part B to this is, what is your position on the recommendations proposed by the Housing Oversight Task Force? And I can't clarify that for you because I don't know what the Housing Oversight Task Force is. So with that said, Ms. Cortes, you begin.
Okay. So the proposed zoning changes, first I want to take a couple of steps back. I think it's really important because what I want to say is that while RUPCO is a fantastic model, RUPCO has a minimum of 40 units for them to make a profit. So we must understand that. And so let's start there. Second, a community land trust is not for profit, meaning they work for us. They adhere to our zoning. It could be local money. They could partner up with the Land Conservancy. Basically, we make our rules. They have more options to get money. They can control it forever, not for a period of time. So forever, it can be sold at a specified price. And I think that is really important in our discussion as we proceed. So I'm not stuck on supporting the proposed zoning in whole. I think that we need to break it down into simple English language and discuss those important parts. What I think are most important, first I want to talk about the environmental protections. Currently in our law, our zoning law more specifically, we don't have adequate protections in my mind. I want to see the concept of net acreage be incorporated for the town of Woodstock. What that means is half of any development land is set aside for open space, period. That's it. And my time is running out. The second thing, I'm gonna stay with that. So within that clustered environment, I would like to see no more than 2 floors. And I'm glad, I was happy to hear David mention the architect contest. It was something that I had proposed, and I fully support that. That's how we're going to be creative here.
Thank you. Ms. Moran?
Thank you. You're gonna kill me. Can you repeat it? How would I update this
Sure.
one more time? These are complex.
No,
These are like complex
it's
questions.
also a double question.
All right,
So
thanks.
regarding your plans for housing and development, what specific changes to the zoning laws would be required to enact them?
Okay.
And part B of that is, what is your position on the recommendations proposed by the Housing Oversight Task Force?
Thank you. How would I update zoning? I think the Housing Oversight Task Force did a lot of good work. I think there are just a few more tweaks that we need to do to it. One thing I would like to see is streamlining the process for certain scenarios. When we have a local builder who has an environmentally sound plan, and it's for something that will increase the inventory in affordable housing, like an ADU, and it makes sense, I think we should streamline that process, and we shouldn't burden that applicant with bureaucratic red tape and time. I think that will help us get there faster. I think another way to update the zoning is looking at the SDRs. So everyone's talking about SDRs. There's good and bad, right, with SDRs. So as you've heard earlier, some STRs are actually second homes for people. Generally, these are well-maintained properties. They add to the aesthetics of the neighborhood. It generates tax revenue. These homes, I don't think, take away from affordable housing. So I think that the taxes that are generated from the STR permits and whatnot are good for the town. Generally, affordable housing, you're not looking for a house with a pool, a bunch of bedrooms. That's why I'm saying it's not part of that inventory. It also adds to our economy with cleaners, maintenance, land, etc. The bad thing is it does reduce long-term housing. And as a result, the rents get driven up.
Thank you. Mr. Wallace?
Well, the last thing we need is another task force on housing, that's for sure. We have one, and they are certainly focused a lot on, and they're doing great work, and they're doing great work on affordable housing. I really support their initiative to look at and assess the possibility of affordable housing on 3 town-owned parcels. I'd even say that maybe we should consider trading and they're selling one of those parcels and finding something that is even more suitable, if it's possible, that would be on town water, would have town sewer, would be near transportation. I'm against the new zoning proposals, which I think will encourage overdevelopment, cause congestion, and create a lot more million-dollar condos rather than affordable housing. But the new zoning proposals will also lead to more lawsuits, which we don't need. I was recently at the same meeting that Marcel, I think we stood next to each other, when the lawyer, this high-priced lawyer from Snyder and Snyder, which is a law firm that's representing some residents, mentioned that he accused the town of violating State Environmental Quality Review Act as well as open meetings law. So he said, and he sent a letter to the town, which I have and can share, and the town board has failed to perform the necessary studies and environmental review and provide a comprehensive record to the public, but expects the public to provide specific comments to various proposals, to proposed revisions to sections of the town code in a disjointed and piecemeal fashion. And you know what that is? That is a shot across the bow. That is a legal threat. And I really think that we could spend taxpayer dollars a lot more wisely avoiding another lawsuit.
Thank you. Ms. Golubov?
Well, David brought up the fact that we're being sued, or there's a threat of being sued, and I think one of the reasons that we're being threatened with lawsuits is because there's so much vagueness in the current zoning law. So if we talk about updating the zoning law and making it really, really precise, then we kind of avoid that problem. Also, it'd probably be a great idea to renew the attorney budget for the zoning department so that they can fight developers in a better way. And then in terms of talking about the Housing Oversight Task Force, I mean, these guys did townwide mapping and analysis to identify environmentally sensitive areas, which hasn't been done. I mean, if we're going off the zoning code was done in the 80s, I mean, this is up-to-date information about where our environment is right now and where, not 40 years ago. I mean, they talked to seniors, architects, volunteers, religious leaders, builders. They went to the county, they brought it to the county, they brought it to the county planning board, they added recommendations, they added all the county requirements. We're on the 3rd revision right now. I don't know how much more in-depth we're gonna get on this before we start dragging it anymore. I mean, if we can agree that this is a crisis, this is like the #1 thing to do to solve this crisis and move forward. Yeah, that's basically what I have to say about it.
Thank you. Mr. Nagel?
That's a complicated one, but we certainly don't need any more lawsuits. The presentation that was made by the attorney that David mentioned in the town board meeting, I think that is the shot across the bow. I agree, we want to try to solve this problem as quickly as we can, but I think at this point, because of what we're hearing from that attorney, we need to slow things down and make sure we get the process correct. It's really complicated. Changes to the zoning law, if we're going to allow further development with ADUs or more units on any in particular parcel, we have to make sure, if it's under the guise it's going to be for affordable housing, the law has to have teeth. If you don't have teeth in the law, you're going to lose the battle. Now, Woodstock has had a really big problem with enforcement over the last 10 years especially. Paul Schultes Sr., the former zoning officer, a lot of people did not like that guy, but he was tough, and we didn't have the problems we have today with lack of enforcement. The STRs, it's complicated. I'm not looking to pull everybody's permits for that. But maybe there's a way, as some of those permits expire, or those properties change hands, maybe there's a way to sunset that permit and have less of them. It's just really complicated. I don't have all the answers for that by any means. House sharing, I think that's a novel idea and would serve a certain segment of the population, but you're not going to bring the young families into that setting that you want to keep the school open and the community vibrant with young people.
Thank you.
Can I ask what an STR is?
Is a short-term rental unit. It's like Airbnb, right? Ms. Osmond?
So, changes to the specific zoning laws that I think the proposed zoning offers that I believe in are especially centered around the environment, because what the proposed zoning is that 50% of any usable land in a parcel, so that would be excluding wetlands, would be kept as open green space, and there is no such requirement for that in our current zoning. So I do think that that's a very good idea, and I respect all the work that the Housing Oversight Task Force did and all the research they did and the environmental reviews. And I know that they went very granular with everything, so I think that that's an important thing. I think that Lily had mentioned Granicus, which is the third-party agency that comes in using AI to actually analyze, source, trace buildings that are used as short-term rentals, as STRs, and then aid step 2 in enforcement, because we only have a few people in our building department. They are the enforcement officers. We can't keep track of everything. We can't find all of the illegals, but paying the money to find something like, to use something like this company allows us to put a stop to all of these additional short-term rental units that are out there, and also bring in some revenue if they're not paying taxes and fees. Thank you. One of the things I wanted to mention too is that the Housing Oversight Task Force proposal for additional units, and this is where I disagree, says that a unit is 4 to 1,000 square feet, and talks about units, buildings of 8 units. That would be an 8,000 square foot building. So I think that those conversations need to be had, because not only do we need to keep our buildings lower, but not huge. They are meant to be looking like single-family homes according to the proposal. So, sorry, I'm out of time.
Thank you. Okay, here's the elephant in the room, I believe. Maybe yes, maybe not. And it's the Xena development, okay? The Xena development is a project that affects both the town of Ulster and the town of Woodstock. How do you think the town of Woodstock should handle the situation with Xena development? If your position representing Woodstock is in conflict with the town of Ulster, how would you proceed? And we'll begin with Ms. Moran.
Thank you. The Xena development. So, initially the proposal included things like a golf course and maintaining the helipad, as we all know, and the developers compromised and came down. They haven't gone away yet. I think we should really come to the table and sit down and talk to them, because they seem willing to compromise. They seem willing to really want to make this happen. I think you've heard a lot of programs tonight that we've talked about with tax incentives that we can offer them to include affordable housing in that project. The location is not an entirely bad one. There is actually some mass transit, there's trailways that does go near the location that could bring people to Woodstock if they just go a little bit out towards 28. And I think that, I think we shouldn't just dismiss the Xena Woods development altogether. We tend to put our hands up, especially when we hear about a big developer coming to our town. We're not gonna get ourselves out of this mess unless we work with developers. We've gotta work with them, we've gotta tell them, look, we're Woodstock. We've got a character to maintain, we're about the environment, and we have certain requirements. If they're willing to work with us and maintain what is the character of our town and what's important to us, I think it's a conversation that should be had. They can still make money and adhere to these things that we're asking them to, and they know that. And if not, then maybe some other developer down the road will realize there is an opportunity here. We do need housing, we need it long-term, and to be a green developer is to be a smart developer.
Thank you. Mr. Wallace?
We should stop them, we may not be able to. The way it's set up is all the tax money that project for the very wealthy will create, goes to the town of Ulster, not much goes to the town of Woodstock. Well, we do have to deal with, because of Eastwoods Road is our access point, which is the town of Woodstock. Well, we are going to have to, and it's the only access for the fire department and for EMTs. So it'll just create basically a sucking sound of resources for Woodstock and generate revenues for the town of Ulster. So I'd do anything that is possible to stop that initiative from happening. I don't think it is in the character of Woodstock. I don't think their developers are going to like suddenly, those developers, I'm sure they're nice guys. I don't think they're going to like go, let's suddenly turn our development for the most wealthy and turn it into affordable housing. I don't think that's going to happen in the slightest with these guys. Yeah, I do think we need to work with developers. I think we need to work with RUPCO and any other nonprofit developer to focus on the 139 rental units and 118 for sale units that is the gap that the housing committee identified, and that's low, right? That needs to be increased, and it has. And if it's 40 units that are added to that gap, I'm all for that if it's RUPCO, and they did a beautiful job with Woodstock Commons, and we should replicate that whenever possible.
I have a follow-up for Mr. Wallace. And again, it's up to 30 seconds.
Yeah.
You didn't really speak to if your position representing Woodstock is in conflict with the town of Ulster. How would you proceed?
Well, I would certainly sit down with the town of Ulster. I mean, we're going to end up probably in court with this. I have a feeling. So it will be a situation where it's going to play out. You know, it's going to. We may not be able to stop this project. But
so you're saying that you would consider going to court?
Well, I don't know if I certainly yes.
Okay, great, thank you, Ms. Cordes.
Okay, this is a big topic for us, and I want to be very clear. I don't want to hope that they're going to compromise. I do not want to say we're going to stop them if we can't. Okay, and then say that current zoning is fine, which is allowing this whole discussion and exhausting our activists. There's so many problems with the Xena Homes development. There's critical habitat loss, biodiversity threats, water quality concerns, forest fragmentation, and transparency issues. There's also questionable environmental assessments that they've done. So, what would I do? First, I'd ensure that our planning process remains rigorous and transparent. This means requiring comprehensive environmental impact studies conducted by independent experts who would thoroughly document all potential threats to our CEA or critical environmental area. Second, I'd facilitate meaningful dialogue between all stakeholders. We have to, they own the property. Developers, environmental groups, neighboring landowners like the Rod and Gun Club, and residents. The concerns about wetland protection aren't just environmental issues, they're preserving our character and our heritage. Third, I'd work to strengthen our town's environmental review procedures to ensure they have real teeth. They don't right now. This includes updating our zoning code to better protect critical corridors and water resources while balancing reasonable development rights. And I'd work collaboratively with the town of Ulster to ensure a coordinated approach. Environmental concerns do not respect town boundaries, and neither should our planning processes.
Thank you, Ms. Osmond.
Yeah, I agree that environmental concerns don't respect town boundaries, and Woodstock definitely needs to be involved with the town of Ulster. One of the things I read recently is that Quigley, the Ulster supervisor, is now talking about having Ulster take the lead seeker position. Seeker is SEQR, State Environmental Quality Review. And if Eastwood Roads is the only access, Eastwood in Woodstock is the only access to the 30 homes that are going to be built in Ulster, then Woodstock should be taking that lead. And I agree also, it's going to be Woodstock's emergency services that are going to be impacted. So I think that that additional authority in terms of environmental quality review should be given to Woodstock, because it is going to impact us environmentally and it's going to impact us financially. I also believe that the additional portion of that land, I believe it's 600 acres in total, the portion that's in Woodstock, I would really encourage these developers to consider donating it to the Woodstock Land Conservancy or the Woodstock, the Community Land Trust, rather than developing it. I mean, yeah, one could say, well, let's negotiate with them and try to get affordable housing built. That may happen or that may not happen, but we have to be conscious of the fact that this was originally envisioned as a luxury development. There was a helipad, there was a golf course, there were going to be flying in golf pros to the airport there to play, and these are still the same people. I'm not saying they're bad people, but this was their original plan. And so I don't know if we're going to be able to really flip that. So I think we really need to be focused on preserving our resources, preserving our environment, and also, and when I say resources, I don't just mean environmental, I mean town resources too. I think Woodstock really needs to take a stand.
Thank you. Ms. Karlikov?
So, I think we should be fighting it at all measures that we possibly can. Again, if this gets through and we don't fight it, and this is again why it would be really important to have a budget for a zoning attorney or a zoning department attorney. But this is exactly what the proposed zoning would prevent, right? We're sending the message, if we allow this to happen, if we don't fight it, that we're open to this very kind of development. And we know, I mean, we already know how critical the environment is. I think in terms of working with Ulster, I mean, if they are the ones that really stand to make the most money off of this, then I think they should figure out how they want to get it done. I don't think we should have to capitulate and give them anything so that they can get all this tax revenue. And then we're left leaving our emergency services, which are already, pretty short in supply, taking care of a development that we're not even, paying for, or not getting paid for. Like, that's ridiculous. And I think, in terms of if, it very well could go to court, that would be really, really unfortunate. But also having the conversation with Ulster to make sure that their zoning code has environmental protections in place and that they have a kind of backbone saying, well, we're not gonna, if this development does happen, you're not gonna be using pesticides because it's a wetlands area, you're not gonna be doing these certain things that could damage the surrounding and outlying areas outside of that development. Because as we know, everything leaches into the water and into the soil. So yeah, it's not a standalone environment, right? It's still a piece of a bigger puzzle. But yeah, I mean, I think we should be doing absolutely everything we can to fight it.
Thank you. Mr. Nagel?
That is the elephant in the room, and instances like Xena development are when you realize how inadequate your zoning laws may be. One of the things that everybody has to understand is the owner of the property has a right to develop. You hope that your zoning law would protect you and provide what you want. The problem there is it's in the town of Ulster. The town of Ulster will have to follow their own zoning law. The town of Woodstock can try to work with them and persuade them to limit it as much as they can. But it's a big problem because we don't necessarily have the authority. The environment is the other thing. The environmentally sensitive, CSEA, critical environmental area. I guess the WEC developed that. The problem with that is, my understanding is it's only advisory. Well, why is it advisory? Why isn't it a law? that would be required to be followed by the planning board. The shared services of the fire department coverage, that I believe ends up having to be solved through a shared services agreement. The town of Ulster, if they're not going to be able to provide the coverage, they would have to work something out with the town of Woodstock, and there would be a payment towards offsetting the cost of that. This is a development of 40 houses. It sounds like they're all going to be non-affordable units. If you can persuade them to do some affordable units, that's great. It seems very unlikely. I don't know. It's a complicated issue. It's not in our town. The access road is our town, so we should certainly have a say over what goes on in there. But we're very limited, I believe, unfortunately.
Thank you. So we're on the next question here, right? I moved these around, so I thought we needed to charge up. You know, it was getting a little too calm here, so I thought we'd go to Zena. Okay. So next one. What ideas do you have to repurpose existing buildings to avoid or minimize the necessity for new development? And I think we begin with Mr. Wallace, yes?
Yeah. Can you repeat the question, actually?
Sure. Okay. What ideas do you have to repurpose existing buildings to avoid or minimize the necessity of new development?
Well, wherever possible, we could infill, existing, we could certainly go to Rupco, and for Woodstock Commons, there may be a potential to infill in that complex. So I'm also for zombie homes. They're not that many, but I certainly would have a conversation with Habitat for Humanities and see what they can do. But I think this is solved by first keeping people in their homes who are here. And I think that's like the first step to me. I have also, there's been a lot of talk about STRs. I do want to say that some of the people who are running STRs are broke. And for those people, I would say that another way to keep people in their homes would be to end the fees for people who are on SNAP or getting another government aid program, an anti-poverty program. I think we need to actually eliminate those fees and also eliminate the fees for building permits for seniors and other people who are financially strapped, and keep them in their homes too.
Thank you. Ms. Cordes, do you need me to repeat that? It's about repurposing buildings?
No, thank you. So how we're going to repurpose and minimize impact to the environment, I feel like I touched on it, but I'm going to go into a little bit more depth. One is smart clustered development. So we can work with complete streets to allow for 2-story mixed-use buildings in our town center with retail below and affordable apartments above. We can leverage existing infrastructure rather than extending septic and water systems. That will reduce pressure on environmentally sensitive outlying areas. Environmentally conscious accessory dwelling units. So small scale, and this is something that I think is pretty important. ADUs will create affordable housing at a low cost because there's no need to develop additional infrastructure. The ADUs can be required to connect to existing septic systems only where capacity allows. And new ADUs provide housing, I guess on average, that could be 44% smaller per capita than standard new single-family homes. So that alone will promote housing and reduce the environmental impact And we can do things like mandatory septic capacity assessment before an ADU is approved, prohibit ADUs and frankly all building in R8, which is our most environmentally sensitive zone. And we can require water usage monitoring, conservation measures, and we can put things in place like deed restrictions, ensuring that the ADU rental to households earning 80% or less of area median income. So these are ways to help build those up and incentivize people to build an ADU, which costs way less than building a home.
Thank you. Ms. Moran.
Thank you. So I agree with some of the things that Anula said about ADUs. I think they make a lot of sense. They make sense for seniors as well as single people who are looking to rent, who maybe just have one child or a cat or a dog. I think that we should revisit the cap regularly on SDRs to make sure that it doesn't make ADUs prohibitive, so that it doesn't encroach upon our ability to create those kinds of affordable housing. Excuse me. I think it would also be a good idea to connect landlords with tenants, maybe at the town level. Sometimes it's difficult when you have people who are not from the area trying to move here. It's not like we can all go on Craigslist, and getting those two connected might actually streamline the process. You would actually be able to talk to someone and know, well, they work here, but they don't live here, but they know these people for references, etc. I think expanding the home share program that family does is huge. I have a neighbor that she's an elderly woman that has a dog. She engaged in the home share program, and there's a man that lives with her now. He's able to walk her dog every day, and he helps her around the house. It really works. He was borderline homeless before they were connected. He has a sense of pride. He's contributing to her. Also, now he's walking in the community. We all know him and recognize him. He helps out and says, hey, do you want me to take your garbage cans in? That's a real community bond, and that's something that came out of a program that is working. We just need to expand it a little bit more. I think the town gave, I want to say, $40,000 to family last year, and I think it's worth a couple more bucks.
Thank you. I think last time I mixed up the order, but if you forgive me, I'm going to ask Ms. Osmond again so I can then get back on track here. So, Ms. Osmond, could you begin?
Sure. So one of the things that we could do to repurpose existing buildings would be to pull back on short-term rentals, reducing the cap allowed, particularly for non-residents. We need to bring that housing back into the fold as long-term housing. We also need to be cognizant of giving our residents a break where they need it, because it is true, I have spoken to people who are dependent on renting out their, whether it be extra building, extra apartment above their garage, or extra room in their house as part of their income. So I think we really need to differentiate between residents and non-residents. I think we need to be very, very sensitive to that. I think, as I had mentioned before, the idea of zombie houses, I know they are few and far between, but there are a handful of them around, and if we could partner in some way with Habitat for Humanity to resurrect, refurbish, rebuild, whatever those homes need, and then put them into the housing pipeline as affordable housing, whether that's for rental or for purchase, but in partnership with Habitat, I think that would be a very good idea. I think we should be looking at tax incentives for ADUs that would house long-term renters, family members, and building affordable housing clauses into the deed. In other words, it runs with the deed. Even if you sell your home, that ADU is deeded to be used for long-term affordable housing. That remains with the property. I think also we've heard various discussions of needing grant writing services in this town. There may be additional grants for homeowners that we could help discover as a town and help publicize for people to actually apply for. And lastly, sustainability measures. I think that goes a long way towards affordability in existing homes as well, helping to connect residents with possible ways to help.
Thank you. Ms. Kolikoff.
So I have two big points on this. So this is where we get into the floating residential district. The floating residential district would be a kind of floating area, but it gives the ability for upzoning. So it gives the opportunity for RFPs and RFQs for cool ideas depending on location, and that would, go into like mixed-use commercial residential spaces. So when you think about, if we think about the school, and if the school were to close, that kind of districting, right? If we adopted that kind of districting and that kind of zoning, we could actually apply it in that area and make it into something that would be beneficial for the community. Second point on that, I think, and I know that no one wants the school to close, but that's something that's not really in the town board's control. Since we haven't been doing anything about affordable housing for the last 20 years, it might be something that's really coming down the pike. I think it would be a really smart move to have a resolution ready to go, so as soon as that does happen, the town could get it before any developers could. And that would be a huge, huge benefit because that land is easily developable. It's in the center of town. It would be a good message to people coming to town because, it would be, this is what we're doing. We're trying to conserve it. If we lose a school, it's going to be devastating. But if we could do something good that had a positive message and a positive impact with that space, I think that would be really important. So that should be a really big priority.
Thank you. Mr. Nagel.
So I agree with what Lily's saying about the school. If unfortunately it has to close, that probably is the most likely parcel that the town of Woodstock can get any real density of housing units that could be affordable. It's already on the municipal water and sewer districts. And I think if it's going to become available after it's closed, it would be a big mistake on the part of the town to not be sure that the town acquires that somehow. Whether the town then transfers that to a housing authority or takes on the project themselves, that's another aspect that I'm unsure of. I don't personally believe the town of Woodstock can undertake such a project on their own. It takes expertise of an organization like RUPCO or Habitat. As far as the repurposing of buildings in the town for affordable housing, it's a great idea. It's going to be very limited, and here and there one may become available, but sure, we should try to take every opportunity or assist any opportunity to engage in something that would make housing available that's affordable. The home share program, it does fill a need. It's an important program. Any little bit that can be provided to help disadvantaged people stay in the community is a great thing. It's really complex. I don't have all the answers yet. I'm not sure I'll ever have all the answers. But we really have a responsibility to work towards that and involve other agencies. That's what they do. It's not what town boards do. We need to engage those other authorities to assist the town board in helping make these decisions and acquire these properties.
Thank you. We have 3 more questions left, but one of the questions folks have been touching on, and so actually you have up to 2 minutes. You don't have to do 2 minutes, but I feel it's only fair because some of you commented and others didn't, so I want to give you all an opportunity. So it's up to 2 minutes. If you have anything more to say about this, what is your position on short-term rentals? And we'll begin with Ms. Cordes.
Okay, so short-term rentals are here. We have a cap, so the town several years ago put a cap on the number of legal short-term rentals. And they are, in fact, to some degree, a very important tool for some of our elders to stay in their home. And I have supported the elder community who needs those STRs, short-term rentals, to get a little bit of money to help them stay in their home here in Woodstock. They're on fixed income, they depend on this, they have artists come in from the city, they know them for literally in some cases decades, and they want to be able to continue that. This said, my position on short-term rentals is that there's a way to start to get the cap down. So the short-term rental permit does not necessarily have to go with the deed to the next owner. That's a selling point today from what I understand, and I would support in full having that, that home be removed from the short-term rental permit list so that we can encourage things like ADUs, which we spoke about. I think that's about it on SDRs.
That's great, love it. Ms. Moran.
Thank you. So I will just compliment what I said earlier. I think ADUs are a better alternative to seniors, getting them housing long-term. Again, there are good and bad things about SDRs. I think it's also important for us to see them be as energy efficient as possible. I think that the fees that are generated by SDRs, we should take another look at how to use those fees to incentivize owners to create long-term rentals. So if there's an SDR, maybe someone puts an ADU off the garage, so they have someone there year-round on the property, which benefits them. It actually adds to the inventory of long-term rentals, and it's actually an SDR and an ADU coexisting on the same property. And maybe that person is employed by the owner to maintain the property as well. I do like the idea of revisiting the cap annually. I think that the way things change in Woodstock from year to year is fast, and I think that we should always make sure that that cap makes sense with what our needs are, supply and demand. I think that these are basically the additional things that I wanted to say about SDRs.
Thank you. Mr. Wallace.
First of all, you never raise a fee several hundred% on an STR, in my opinion, without really prior notice. I don't think that was fair to do to the folks, especially the ones, you know, who are owner-occupied. I think we have to differentiate between the de facto hotel companies that have like 8 units, and they usually they can, you know, they don't live here, and someone who's renting out your extra bedroom to survive. So important that we don't demonize folks who are running STRs. Attrition is a great thing in terms of the cap. As the cap should be reduced, because I do think it depresses the long-term housing rental market. I think there's only like 18 rentals in the 12498 zip code right now, according to Zillow. And as I mentioned, I always think about people who are struggling in this town. That's what caused me to raise my hand to do this crazy thing in the first place. Was you know, that I felt that people were really struggling here, and so again, I would eliminate STR fees for residents who receive other government aid programs like SNAP and Medicaid. We could do that today, and that would be fairer and help people stay in their homes. And we can also, along the same lines, for repairs, eliminate the fee for building permits for seniors and low-income people.
Thank you. Ms. Kolikoff?
So I'm going to talk about Granicus again. The increased short-term rental permit fees were supposed to be used to purchase the enforcement modules, and that never happened. And because we don't have those enforcement modules, we can't collect on infractions, and we're losing out on tax revenue, first and foremost. I think we could be giving property tax incentives for owners to switch to long-term rentals. I think that would be a pretty smart move. I think we could be giving preference to owner-occupied short-term permits. All have just banned non-owner-occupied short-term rentals entirely. Yeah, I mean, those are really my top three. I mean, I know that short-term rentals are an absolute necessity for businesses to survive, but what happens when you have it out of balance is that when you don't have a tourist season, like the winter is not really a tourist season for a community anymore, that means you have hundreds of vacant houses and a lack of people coming to your business. So that's why we see businesses that appear very successful in the summer closing. So in getting it back into balance and getting those houses actually occupied full season, full year, you'll see less struggle and less, price jackups during the summer from local businesses.
Thank you. Mr. Nagle?
So the STRs that are utilized by residents that absolutely need to have some sort of an income stream coming from their property so that they can stay in the town and pay the taxes, I wouldn't want to take any of that away. I do believe in that instance we can reduce fees or eliminate them altogether. The properties that get used for the STR use that are non-owner occupied, I don't necessarily agree that that was a good thing that should have ever been implemented. With the zoning law, there's oftentimes grandfathered uses that when a property changes hands or goes dormant for a while, that use expires, whereas the STR for the non-owner occupied basically permitted an otherwise unallowed use in the residential zone. So it's a little bit of a conflict on that. But the STR thing definitely should be revisited every year. And once again, I would think that perhaps maybe as some of them expire or change hands, maybe we sunset those permits. That way those units may become available for affordable housing or long-term housing. So we don't have so much of a transient community.
Thank you. Ms. Osmond?
So, yeah, first and foremost, those people who need income from their short-term rental units to remain in town definitely need to be supported, whether it is through reduced fees or just a different structure for resident STR owners. I do believe that we should be revoking the STR permits of short-term rentals that are owned by corporations. If we have a company in town that owns 8, 10 buildings, when their permit that they've paid for expires, it should not be renewed. That should not happen. I don't think that, STRs right now, they do not run with the deed. I believe that if you have an existing permit, you can, if the house changes hands, you can reapply through the building department. There is no guarantee that that STR permit will be reissued, as it is based on a cap. But I think we should also be looking at what additional towns are doing. Shandaken's STR regs now require a 1-year wait before applying for an STR permit when a property changes hands. We could be looking at that. Hurley and I believe now Olive just do not allow non-resident STRs. They're not giving those permits anymore. And I think that's something that we should really be examining as well. So I think we could change our STR regulations in ways that our neighboring towns have done, or at least certainly look at that and be able to control it a bit more. I also agree that STR fees should be used to support something like the hiring of this Granicus company, which does monitor and trace STR usage, and would, if there are illegal STRs happening and there are STR permits still available, then that tax revenue would go back to the town. So I think that would be a very solid idea. And I think that we should be looking at tax incentives for people who change from an STR to a long-term rental. Thank you.
Thank you. So wasn't I surprised? I thought this was going to be 2 seconds, but people have things to say. Okay, we have 2 more questions. This one, we're going to get away from housing, and it's how would you improve the town's infrastructure, such as sidewalks, parks, paths, and quality of life issues such as a noise ordinance for both locals and tourists? So there's 2 parts to that, the infrastructure and quality of life. And we'll begin with Ms. Moran.
Thank you. trying to stay on board here and write down all the different components of these questions. Infrastructure. This is a sore point with this town. I've actually been in touch with and had several conversations and ongoing conversations with our highway department. Our highway department is struggling to keep people. They're getting poached and go to other towns. The equipment that we have is outdated. When comparing our policies to other town policies, we're buying used trucks, we're keeping them for a long time. Other towns buy new trucks and after 5 years rotate them out. I was told that it's kind of a joke that when there is a situation like a bad snowstorm and multiple towns show up on site, the joke is, well, we don't know if Woodstock's actually gonna make it because their trucks are always breaking down. Those are the people who are supposed to be working on our infrastructure. So we need to give them the right tools so that they can work on the infrastructure. We need to get the infrastructure, which has been lacking maintenance, up to par, and then we need to be proactive and get it on a maintenance schedule so that we can have an infrastructure that supports a town. There are businesses here that depend on the infrastructure, our roadways and our culverts. These need to work. Culverts, once again, let's talk about the environment, climate change and flooding. How many times have we not been able or had to take a detour? Right now there's a detour on Wittenberg Road because they're changing that culvert because it floods out all the time. We need to get ahead of this, and working with the highway department is the way that we can do that. And the other part of the question was the quality of life. We need to basically ensure that how do we?
Thank you.
I feel like it's the SATs that I got.
Mr. Wallace.
Infrastructure. Wow, we really need to improve our infrastructure in this town. We need to increase our maintenance staff, apparently. And I just heard about the highway garage. You know, we know that the roof on the highway garage has been leaking for a really, really long time. But I didn't know is that someone almost got electrocuted, got shocked, who works at the town. And that would have been a disaster, because I think that insurance companies would have looked at our lack of fixing that problem that we knew about and would say, it's on you, Woodstock, and we're not going to cover that. So it shouldn't take an electrocution or an election for the town to do more to improve its infrastructure. So we got to fix those parking lots. You know, they have potholes all the time. Everyone always complains about that they're going to bust. How many times have you heard and I heard that people are going to bust their axle in the parking lot? It's like constant. So, but here's one of the problems. We now have determined and spent $200,000 on determining that one of those parking lots might be suitable for affordable housing. Well, that is great, but it does delay us. We won't hear until the end of the year, but it does delay us from paving the parking lots that are, you know, constantly causing problems in this town. We have a budget that we had a in excess of $3 million surplus last year. Let's fix our parking lots and sidewalks once and for all. That's it.
Thank you, Ms. Cordes.
Okay, so I do agree with Aaron and David on this. Our infrastructure requires a lot of help. So one of the things that we can first do is the next supervisor has a responsibility to be clear about the expectations regarding quality of life in Woodstock. Potholes that look like moon craters are not acceptable. I drive a sedan, and I'm afraid to drive in some of our own parking lots. I don't go to Big Deep, goodness, because I won't get out. So this is a fundamental problem, and we do have a $3 million budget surplus, but we've got moon craters in our parking lots. So very simply, I think that good communication and the right tools for maintenance and highway is an absolute requirement. We can do better than this. This one baffles me. And 80% of our maintenance can be scheduled with 20% allowed for emergencies. Our dog park, I've got 2 puppies, I barely go there. These are things that are instant fixes. But forward, positive looking, what can we actually do? We can start to extend our infrastructure. So we may or may not know that Complete Streets has been working with the Department of Transportation, that the sidewalks are scheduled to start to be fixed and extended to a certain point, and they're pushing to have that go from the start of the green to the Bearsville Post Office, which is wonderful. We need this, it's so overdue. There will be 40 trees, I think, lining all of that. Can we update our sewer and water so that more people and any new development can tap into it? This is something that I think we could look at right out of the gate and leverage the work that's going to happen, coordinate with the right authorities, and advance our infrastructure.
Thank you. Mr. Nagel.
So infrastructure, I know a little bit about that through my business, and the state of our infrastructure right now is really pretty bad. You can start with the highway department facility that has had a leaking roof practically from the day the building was built. The heating system, it doesn't do its job. It's questionable whether the solar system is doing its job. I think the highway department building probably, if you wanted to get it back into shape, probably needs $300,000 worth of work. I've been there, I've seen the water pouring through the roof. I see the steel doors that are rotting off. How do we build a multi-million-dollar facility and allow it to go to rack and ruin? We need maintenance. The equipment that the highway department uses, it's absolutely correct. It's outdated. We need a planned replacement policy. There's no question about it. The highway superintendent is a good friend of mine and worked for me for a number of years. I've got the ins and outs of what the problems are, and we need to really solve the problem. Culvert pipes, catch basins, we're running way behind. There was a huge amount of infrastructure work that was done back in the late 70s, early 80s, into the 90s. Much of that under the highway superintendent, Billy Harder. He knew how to run the department. We had a good working crew, and they really got the job done. But a lot of that now is coming due for replacement. The parking lots, I want to know where the money that we collect in parking fees goes, and we can't even patch the potholes. It's routine maintenance, get it done. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Osmond.
Okay, there's a lot here. Obviously, infrastructure needs dealing with. I think everyone here at the table has really gotten into that. We need, and I want to give a big shout out to Complete Streets for the work they are doing on our sidewalks and also creating walking paths and bike paths. I think they're looking at connecting the rail trail possibly to the town of Woodstock, as well as they're working on a path, they may have actually completed it, connecting the Bearsville Center through to the Como to town so one can walk through the woods there. But there's other things to quality of life other than infrastructure too. Parks, for example. I've been working on the Youth Center Task Force for the last 2 years, and you may have heard that there's a master plan proposal that we've spent time developing after a lot of community input. And we're actually in the process of revising that, scaling that back a little bit based on some of the feedback, and there will be additional presentations. But what I want to say is that would offer up a new youth center, a new skate park, hiking trails in the 6.3 acres of town-owned land that's in back of Andy Lee Field, perpendicular to the end, so those would be nature trails accessing areas that we've had no access to before. There would be accessibility in playground. There would be, if we can do the private fundraising, there would be a multi-purpose farmers market pavilion that would also be a covered sports court. There would be a senior center wing on the community center, and most importantly, a lot of people asked for a community pool, and so far we've gotten pledges of $1.1 million through private funds, we haven't even started fundraising yet, that would go a long way towards the community pool. And lastly, we should not be calling it the noise ordinance, we should be calling it the sound ordinance. Music is not noise. And I do believe that this is our part of our quality of life, it's part of our identity, it's a big part of our economy, and we need to continue work on the task force
Thank you.
recommendations. Thank you.
Ms. Kolikoff.
Sound. Thanks. So obviously, Complete Streets and the Youth Center Task Force have been doing great work, and I'm not really going to reiterate a lot of that because I think it's really, important. In terms of daily quality of life stuff, I think the sound ordinance is kind of a preeminent issue. I happen to have a lot of experience talking about this. I actually support a sound ordinance, right? One of the things that we're seeing with the sound ordinance is that we have two competing ideas. We have a zoning code that's 40 years old that says that if you're in the Hamlet Commercial District, you can be at 64 dBs up until 9 o'clock at night, and then after that you can be at 60. If that were enforceable, and it doesn't appear that it is because it hasn't been enforced, right? Then you would not have outside dining, restaurants, venues, anything in town. So the importance of having a sound ordinance, and the sound ordinance that's being presented is actually pretty close. There's a couple tweaks that it really, really needs, but in terms of having legal statutes and legal ways of actually enforcing it, you cannot, and this is based on EPA regulations, you cannot have people running around with their cell phones trying to measure each other's sound. That's not how it works. You need an actual ANSI device that can be properly calibrated. If you have a cell phone reading and saying that my neighbor is pushing out 75 dBs, that is not admissible in court. Currently, the reason that, we have had our business for almost 9 years now, we've had 2 noise violations, and those both got dismissed. And the reason they both got dismissed is because the law that's on the books is not enforceable. So, in writing the new noise ordinance, it has to be collaborative with the community. We have to make sure that it is legal and that it's enforceable, and it actually supports what our town is about, which is about music. When you look at national polls or international polls about what people think about when they think about Woodstock, they think about music. And if you're going to try to enforce the current zoning code, you're going to lose all of it.
Thank you. So this is our last question. In many instances, development proposals in Woodstock result in opposition, often known as NIMBYism, not in my backyard. How will you address NIMBYism as it relates to development? And we'll begin with Mr. Wallace.
Be honest about it. I think there's not only NIMBYism, I think there's a bias against people who are financially struggling that needs to be addressed. A lot of people talk about affordable housing, and I think there's a resistance that we need to just deal with. And it's not, I don't think it has been properly done. I talked to the head of RUPCO, and he looked at me and he said, there's not the political will in Woodstock to really address affordable housing. That's pretty much what he said. I'm paraphrasing, I'm not quoting, but it's basically that we have to establish the political will to really focus on that issue, which I think we can all largely concur is a crisis. And we have to address that crisis by keeping people in their homes who are about to leave, who are struggling to stay, in a lot of different ways. I've outlined them very specifically, and make this place a lot more affordable. But NIMBYism is a stubborn problem, and there's also this idea that people who come to this town through affordable housing are going to be somehow different. That they're not, they're going to be strangers or foreigners. And the great thing about Woodstock is, and I found it myself, is that people accept you. Not everybody, but certainly once you come to this town, we should welcome people. And certainly there's so much goodwill here that needs to be tapped by a new supervisor.
Thank you. Ms. Cortes.
Did you say opposition in Woodstock? Yeah, so it starts with communication and building trust, right? This is how I look at it. Over time, trust has been deteriorated for one reason or another. And I think that it's incumbent on the next supervisor and frankly the next town board to rebuild that trust. Do what you say you're going to do so that we learn to talk with each other and we trust each other. That requires the ability to communicate, to listen, and to extrapolate from listening those items that are most important and most common to Woodstockers and put it together in a solution that might be like a divorce where nobody gets exactly what they want, but everybody gets something. And we keep in mind our common goals and our values. The environment. This is a topic, I believe, after knocking on hundreds of doors, that we can agree on that, and we don't have to pass it all. So we have to sit down and work on those areas that we do agree on and put those protections in place. And I think that the bulk of Woodstock will come together around smaller, clear, in plain English language, where our value system and the integrity of who we are and who we want to be moving forward will be retained. We don't have to pass everything all at once. We have to communicate, listen, and make sure that those changes make it into the final version or the next version so that people feel heard, because they are heard. And so this is how I think we're going to address the bulk of NIMBYism.
Thank you. Ms. Moran.
Thank you. NIMBYism. I don't think there are that many people in Woodstock who are NIMBYism people. I think that we hear about it a lot, but I genuinely don't think it exists, and it's a problem like people say it is. As somebody who's raised right here in Woodstock, I've seen our town evolve over the years. Sometimes in very beautiful ways, and sometimes in ways that have made it harder for people, residents and artists, to just stay in the area or communicate or stay with their families and continue on with their lives. Woodstock is rooted in preserving what makes us so very special. I think we need to see a Woodstock where young people can afford to live here. We need to see a Woodstock where seniors can remain in their home that they've lived in for generations and watch their grandchildren become active members of our community. We need a Woodstock where small businesses thrive, not only because of good infrastructure, but a town board that listens and is fair. We need a Woodstock where our zoning laws are modernized. They're looked at regularly, they're enforceable, and they also, most importantly, reflect our values and the right to stay in the community that we love. I want to see Woodstock be even more connected, inclusive, and resilient, and still be the artistic and spiritual heart of the Catskills. But I want it to also be a model for what small town sustainability can look like. To get there, we need a town board that's transparent, inclusive, and responsive, with respect for both new voices and the people who've lived here for generations. And that's how we address that.
Thank you. Ms. Osmond.
Okay, so,
Didn't you start?
oh, no.
We're good, we're good. Ms. Osmond.
Okay.
Give her another couple of seconds then.
So, I think that NIMBYism is based in fear. Fear of loss, fear of the other. It can be classist, it can be economically based, but I think it's basically rooted in fear, and a lot of time fear comes from a lack of trust or a lack of transparency. And I think these are two things that whoever is elected really needs to work very hard at to bring to the town board. Trust and transparency, communication, collaboration. And a cognizance of the greater good. I mean, we are going to be elected to represent, and we need to be thinking holistically. We need to be listening to everyone and also thinking realistically and holistically, asking ourselves, what is the greater good? It's not the loudest person or the most important person. And I think that we need to make that very, very clear as a town board. I think when the new board starts next year, there needs to be a reset, a restart, and an acknowledgement that some things worked, some things didn't work. These are the things that didn't work, and we need to be doing this differently. But as far as NIMBYism goes, I think trying to come together as a community through collaboration, transparency, trust building, and a sense of who we are, because Woodstock is not known as a fear-based town. We are meant to be open, inclusive, joyful, celebrating the arts. And we know that these economic times have a lot of people worried as well. People are afraid of, losing their privacy or losing their house or losing their yard or losing whatever it is. But I think somehow we need to try to reset and come together as best as we possibly can, acknowledging that we are a community of very strong opinions and very diverse people. But I do think that the concept of balance and the greater good really, really needs to be emphasized. Thank you.
Ms. Kolikoff?
I tend to agree with Lori on this. I think NIMBYism is a product of fear. It's a product of not knowing what's coming down the pike. It's a product of bad communication, and it's a product of othering people. I think there's a lot of things that we as a town disagree about, but I think one of the things that we do really agree about and doesn't really have that kickback is the comprehensive plan. And I think if we go back and use the comprehensive plan as a guideline, as we're supposed to be, in terms of doing the greatest good for the greatest amount of people and having that intention be very, very clear, the government should never be your enemy. Your neighbor should never be your enemy. When those kind of situations start arising, we should be repairing them. We should be fixing them. We should be healing people, healing our community, and not acting like people that move here from Brooklyn are worse or richer or snobbery or anything. We're engaging in tribalism every single day here. And if we can't bring the community together through having shared visions, like the visions that exist in the comprehensive plan, and in terms of what our practices and what our history are, then I don't know what we're doing in Woodstock, because that's the whole goal. It's peace, love, and music, right? Like, what are we doing?
Thank you. Mr. Nabel?
NIMBYism. I've been around a long time. NIMBYism, I go back and I think about the cell tower. But I'll bet everybody here has a cell phone. Affordable housing, when we go and look back at Rubco, took them 10 years to get that project approved. There was a lot of NIMBYism. I think it was a great project. We're all talking about creating affordable housing now. And when if a location is selected for it, I hope we don't go back to NIMBYism. We need the affordable housing. So when it comes to the affordable housing, if the research and development plans are through the proper process and a good location is selected, I'm one of them guys that can take the heat, but the process has to be right. NIMBYism, it exists in a microcosm. In some instances, with a neighbor is building a pool and then the other neighbor doesn't want to have the noise of the construction of the pool. And then it goes on to bigger problems. The cell tower issue, actually, everybody seems to want better cell service up through the Willow area. I think it's kind of important, but I'll bet if we wanted to put a cell tower up there, we're going to have a lot of NIMBYism. So let's not fall into that NIMBYism trap when it comes to affordable housing. That's something we need. It's really critical, and we all just have to bite the bullet on that when the location is selected.
Thank you. So that was the last question. So I just want to remind folks that we have 2 more forums coming, although actually one is a forum and the other is a meet and greet. On June 8th, which is a week from tomorrow, it will be on vision, management, execution, and accountability. And this will be at the Hornbeck Community Center. It won't be here. And that's from 2:30 to 4:30. And then the meet and greet will be Sunday, June 22nd, your opportunity to actually ask direct questions without it being filtered through me. And that's a meet and greet back at the Town Hall from 2 to 4. I want to thank Woodstock Democratic Committee. I want to thank, this is a great audience. I have to say, this has been a pleasure because there's not been any hassle. It's been really supportive and terrific, and I love that. But last but not least, these folks put themselves out, and whatever happens, they deserve a big round of applause.